All right, good morning, everybody. My name's Leon Harrell. This is In Tune. This is our weekly music practice session where we will practice intentional practice of reading music, sight reading, playing the keyboard, learning about music theory. If you're new to us or if you're joining for the first time today, say hello in the chat window. We've got a lot of people joining in this morning. I see Sandy and James and David and Don, and it's excellent to see you all back again this week. Let's see, before we jump into it, I will tell you I have a little bit different setup today. I'm using a different microphone and the audio may not be as clear as normal. So if the audio is bad, just let me know. I don't know that I can change it today, but that's the bad thing. But the good thing is I'm so excited to show you I got an overhead camera so I can show you things on the keyboard today. So that's going to make up for the bad audio today. But ideally, we'll fix that before next week. But let's before we jump into it, let's just take a look at your comments. I see a lot of action in the comments this morning. Let's see. In particular, I'm seeing David and Don say, "Oh, I'm loving Piano Marvel." And Don, I noticed you said you practiced over 560 minutes this month. That is amazing. And David saying I passed 1,000 for October, pushing 900 so far this month. That is fantastic, and that is why I love Piano Marvel. So if you don't know what that is, or if it's your first time joining us, we talk about different software on this show to help us learn how to play piano or read music better, and one of those tools is Piano Marvel. So if you want to join in on today's lesson and follow along, feel free to. I'll throw a link up on the screen. You can find a link to download Piano Marvel for free to try a 30-day free trial at 1minutemusiclesson.com/toolbox. If you decide to continue using it after the first 30 days, it's a monthly subscription, or you could subscribe annually, but you'll save 20% off if you use our discount code that you find at the link here on the screen. I also added that link here on YouTube in the description box, so if you just open the description box, you can tap on that link. I think this is awesome, guys, that you are able to track your practice and to see how much time you're practicing. I do find that most students will probably triple or quadruple their practice time naturally just by using the software. It's a lot of fun, and it has so many tools to help you practice. Let's see, I see some more comments rolling in here. Let's see. Yeah, just some welcomes and some hellos. So, and again, I apologize if there's background noise today, but we'll do the very best we can. On today's episode, we're going to look at a piece called Prayer of Thanksgiving. I think a lot of people would know this by the first lyric in the song, which is "We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing." So it's a pretty popular hymn to be sung at Thanksgiving time. Oh, awesome, Sandy. Thank you. She says the camera looks great. Yeah, I got a new camera set up, which I'm super excited about. I got a green screen. You might notice some fuzziness behind me. I'm working on the lighting. But that allows me to do a little bit more stuff while we're practicing today. So we're going to jump into it in Piano Marvel. So again, if you want to follow along, go visit that link to download your free copy of Piano Marvel. You'll get it for 30 days for free. And we're going to jump into our piece today. If you want to find it easily, just in the title bar, type in, let's see, "We Gather," I think is one way to find it, where we'll find the easier version. And if you want to find it, the hymnal version, which we're going to look at, you can just type in "Prayer of Thanksgiving," or just part of that. And that'll load that up. So we're going to look at Prayer of Thanksgiving. It's in the collection called Hymns of the Church of Jesus Christ. And within that collection, this is going to be on page 93. So I'm just going to scroll down quickly to open that one, Prayer of Thanksgiving. Okay, and as I just mentioned, there's two versions of this piece. This one is a little more difficult, and it's not so much that it's more difficult to play. It's a hymn that's written to be played on the organ. So when we play hymns from a hymnal, on the piano, there are certain things that can be challenging that may not be obvious to you, which that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we jump into exploring this one fully, this piece is in 3/4. We'll talk about our smart sight reading system in just a moment and go through this piece. But let's take a quick peek at the other version just so you can decide which one's more appropriate for you. So the second one, I think it's easier to find it by typing in the lyric we gather. All right, that's going to bring up a collection called In Recital with Timeless Hymns. And this is in book number 3 on page 10, We Gather Together. All right, so same hymn, same tune, just 2 different titles for the same tune. This one, again, this is really written for or arranged for piano. And you can tell that when you play it because there's not as many awkward stretches for the hand. And there's not the same problems of playing from a hymnal that you might find in this arrangement. So if you're more on the beginner side and you're looking for the easier challenge, go with this version. If you're really looking to improve your hymn playing or just learn about how do you play hymns on the keyboard, piano, and how's that different than the organ, that's going to be the version we look at today. But feel free to ask questions about either. Okay, so I'm going to switch back into my arrangement here in the Hymns of Church of Jesus Christ at page 93. Okay, so anytime we look at a piece on this show, we're sight reading it, and we're going to go through the same system every time, and I call this our smart sight reading. To take a look at the key signature, these little symbols at the beginning, let me click on that, beginning of the score here, that show there's an F sharp and a C sharp. There's 2 sharps in our key signature. All right, and if you don't know, you can just know that by memory. That's the key of D major, or it's possibly its relative minor, B minor. So the second thing we look for is the context clue to tell us which of those 2 keys are we in. And really we just look at the first chord, and regardless if you know your chords or not, you can just look at the pitches, D, F sharp, D, and A. All right, so we're going to play that first chord, and I'm going to play it on my keyboard. All right, D, F sharp, D, and A. All right, and that's a D major chord. All right, so that first chord is D major. Our key signature is telling us D major or maybe B minor. So that's our first chord, and then we'll look at our last chord. That's usually a pretty good context clue as well. So this piece ends on D, F sharp, and D. All right, so we're pretty firmly, this is D major for sure. All right, so we're going to play through a scale in D major. Oh, I think I was muted. I'm sorry. That may have muted. Let me just fix that real quick before we jump too far ahead. All right, so I'm muted there. I'm not muted there, and I'm okay here, and I'm okay here. Okay, I think I fixed it. I think I'm good. Thank you, David, for letting me know that. So what I said was we'll play the scale, and the purpose of that is so we can hear the scale and get accustomed to the sound, play it with our hands, get accustomed to how our fingers are moving or our body motions need to be to play that, and that's just going to get us prepared to read the music. So we're going to play that together slowly, starting on D, so hands on the keyboard, and if you don't have a keyboard, just say the pitches out loud, and we'll do that very slowly together. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Then we'll play the same scale coming back down, so we'll read it from the top counterclockwise. D, C sharp, B, A, G, F sharp, E, D. All right, I'm going to switch to my overhead cam. Let's see. Sandy says losing the audio. It tells me my audio is playing. Is the keyboard too quiet, or is the speaking too quiet, or it could be a combination of the two? Let me know. All right, David says fix now. So hopefully we're good now. Let's take a look at it on the keyboard. So on the keyboard today, just to help you along if you're a beginner, I'm going to highlight a couple things. So we're playing the D major scale, and I'm just pointing here to the D's on the keyboard. I'm going to switch to this guide. That might make it a little bit easier for you. You'll notice on my keyboard, I have middle C labeled with just an orange dot, just so you can acclimate yourself. All right. All right, now I'll turn that keyboard up just a little bit. Thanks, Don, for letting me know. All right, and we're going to play the scale. You can play the correct fingers or not. I'm not too worried about that at the moment. All right, but we're going to do that slowly one more time. And what I'd like to show you today is just sort of a way to conceptualize or think about your sharps and flats. So before we play through that D major scale, I want you to locate the D and the D the next octave above, and we're just going to connect those with all the white keys in between. All right, so really those are just the letters that we're going to use in the scale: D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. And to make it D major, we have to alter some of these notes, which we've already talked about: F sharp and C sharp. All right, so one way to visualize or think about these things as you play them is to think about which notes are altered. All right, so if we alter our F and our C, we're going to alter them up to be sharps. All right, so I just want you to think about them as leaning slightly to the right, because rather than playing on the key, we're just leaning slightly over to the right to play the sharp. So now we can play the D at the top, the D at the bottom. We can connect them together through all the white notes, with the exception of the two that we're highlighting, the F sharp and the C sharp. So I'm going to do that slow. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. All right? And the reason I describe it this way or mention it to you is because when we're reading the music, when we're looking at the sheet music, we're actually, or I am actually, just reading everything on the page as though it were a white key on the keyboard. And if it's a sharp, which all of these accidentals that are in here are sharps, they're all altered over just a little bit to the right on the keyboard. So I'm just thinking shift the finger over to the right a little bit. That may be a slightly different way than you're used to thinking about it, but I go into detail in my book as to why that method works so well. And if you haven't seen that before, I do have a book called How to Read Music Easily in 30 Days. You can get that at oneminutemusiclesson.com/book. And in this book, I talk through lots of techniques as to how to sight read, what sort of mental models am I thinking about when I'm sight reading, and then we go from the beginning of how to read music and find the notes on the keyboard all the way through these different mental models to think through. So if that interests you, check that out at oneminutemusiclesson.com/book. /book. So we're going to switch back into our scale on the keyboard. I'll do that one last time. And we'll listen for the sound, and we'll pay attention to how our fingers are moving on the keyboard. So D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. All right? So if you have questions on that scale, let me know in the comments, or if you're watching this on the replay, let me know in the comments. We'll try to answer those comments throughout the week, or we may answer your question on next week's live episode. So we've listened to the sound of the major scale. All right, and now we're ready to look at the meter. So the next thing in our SMART system is the meter. This piece is in 3/4, which means there's going to be 3 beats in a measure. And the beat itself, that bottom number 4, tells us that the beat is a quarter note. All right, so we're going to count that as it goes along. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And 3/4 is considered a simple meter. And I run into a lot of people that have trouble counting rhythm or reading rhythms accurately, and it usually comes down to not understanding the difference between a simple meter and a compound meter. A simple meter, the beat is divided into 2 equal pieces. So in this case, the quarter note divides into 2 equal pieces to become 2 eighth notes. So as we count that, we'll count 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. All right, so when we count through this, we'll count 3/4 as a simple meter, dividing the beat, the quarter note, into 2 equal pieces, the 2 eighth notes. All right, and the counting the words we'll use for counting are 1 and 2 and 3 and. All right, so that's our meter. All right. If we finish up our acronym for SMART, we'll take a look at the accidentals in the piece, the range of the notes, and then we'll prepare ourselves to read it by preparing ourselves for the tempo. So let's look at the accidentals. And we're just first going to browse through the piece top to bottom. We already know this piece is in D major, and the F sharp and the C sharp, they are altered throughout the piece. So everywhere we see an F on the staff, like this first one in the tenor here, is going to be a sharp. Likewise, for every C sharp that we find, here's an example, every C, it will be a C sharp because our key signature tells us that. Whatever the key signature is at the beginning, all the Fs and all the Cs have been changed to F sharps and C sharps throughout the whole piece of music. But in addition to that, you'll also find some extra accidentals or extra sharps and flats or natural signs throughout the piece. So for example, here is one, G sharp. All right, and here's another G sharp over here. All right. As we scroll through the piece, I don't see any other sharps or flats in the rest of the piece. You may question, well, why are there extra accidentals? What's the purpose of that? Whenever we play music, if everything stays in the scale, if all the notes match the scale, that's called diatonic. It means that the notes fit into the scale. But anytime there's a note outside of the scale, we have a chromatic pitch, or a pitch that is not a part of the scale. There's lots of reasons you might have chromatic notes in music, but in this particular example, we really only see G sharp. And the reason for that G sharp, we're in the key of D major. All right, we're going to very quickly tonicize or emphasize the 5 chord, the A major. And in order to do that, we'll play the leading tone, G sharp, that leads up to the A. So it's just the half step below A. All right, and we'll play the chord that emphasizes that leading tone, which is E major, right, which is the dominant of A. So it very strongly pushes us to the A chord, all right, and that's within the key of D minor. And if that seems confusing to you, that's fine. That's not really what our lesson's about today. But that sort of explains why in this particular case has this composer put a G sharp in the music. All right. So we've scanned through our piece. We've seen the key signature. We see the accidentals throughout the piece of music. Next, we're going to look at the range, just so we can prepare for how much space on this keyboard. This is a pretty large keyboard. How much actual space is the range of this music? So when we look at our score, we'll find the highest note first. So scanning through, and it might take you a while to do it, but scanning through, I find that this E, an octave above middle C, is the highest note. So if we look at our keyboard, that's going to be here. I'm going to remove some of these things just to make that easier. All right, and then I'll just shift my talking head over because it's covering that. All right, so there is our E, which is the highest note in this piece. And when we look at Piano Marvel, the lowest note, I think this G is the lowest note. So this is the G, an octave, a little over an octave below middle C. So when we look at our keyboard, I'll label that too, which is going to be here. All right, and again, I think my talking head's going to cover it no matter where I put it. So here we've got the highest note and the lowest note. So really, we just want to position our body in the middle of that and know that our hands are not going to move any further apart than this. All right, so by knowing the range, we're sort of preparing ourselves for where do my hands need to be throughout playing this piece, and how much of this keyboard do I visually need to sort of get in my line of sight. And it's not that much. That's probably a little under half the width of the keyboard. All right, but it's good to know the range and just be prepared that we're not playing things all outside of the range. Everything is contained within this range. All right, so the last thing we'll do is the tempo. This piece does not have a tempo marking, and most hymnals will not have tempo markings. So you have to figure out the tempo based on the lyrics. So how fast could you sing this song and comfortably take a breath? And then you think a little bit beyond that. If this were to be sung in a church or a cathedral, how large is that space? Because that sort of dictates how quickly musicians might play the music. So if this was performed in a huge cathedral with 1,000 people singing, you might play it a little bit slower to give people time to say the words and for the reverb in the space to sort of die away slowly and have a little bit of space in between the different phrases. If you're playing it on your keyboard at home, that's a completely different aural experience than being inside of a cathedral space. So you don't necessarily have to account for that. But depending on your performance circumstance, you would think about that when it comes time to think about your tempo. For this one, let's see, I would play this probably... I think that's a pretty comfortable tempo for reading it. We might take it a little slower as we read it. Piano Marvel has some practice tools built into it. So if we look in our practice guide, this is letting us know that performance tempo is at 92, practice tempo maybe at 60. So 92. Let's take a listen to it at 92. So I'm going to set it at 92. Click the assess mode, which is one of two modes in Piano Marvel. When we are wanting the computer or the software to be the driver of the tempo, we'll be in assess mode. And assess mode is a great way to start if you don't know the piece and you just want to take a listen. You'll click assess. All right, so let's do that to just listen to a little bit.
Set, go.
Oh, I think I've got my volume turned down.
One, two, three, set, go.
Okay, so you can hear that moves along at a pretty good speed. If I was playing this in a church or a large performance space, I might take it a little bit slower. A lot of people will not read the lyrics that quickly. All right, so let's take it at 60 for sight reading today. And we're going to start by breaking this apart, left hand and right hand. So when you're playing a hymn, it's really important to know that hymns often are composed for the organ, and the organ is different than the piano in the way that it works. And the primary difference, an organ has a pedal board, so you use your feet to play some of the notes. And it may have two sets of keys, or two manuals, they call them. It could have more manuals than that, but a lot of organs have two. But when this music is composed, it's composed so that you're using your left hand and your right hand and your feet to play all the notes. Well, on the piano, we don't have that, so we have to think about it and work with it differently. So when we work on the right hand first, that's going to be just like playing it on the organ. But when we switch to the left hand, if we take a look at here, left hand, there's going to be some moments where we might actually use our thumb on our right hand to play some of those notes. And that's not immediately obvious if it's your first time reading through any hymn, really. So we're going to start with just the right hand for now. All right. And we are going to, let's see, I don't have this sliced any further, but I'm just going to play the first two measures. I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Sorry, first two lines of music, first two systems. All right, I'm just going to scoot that out of the way. All right, so let's count through this one. We'll count the rhythms first, just to give you a chance to get acclimated to that. So we're reading the top melody note, which is going to be the same as the bottom melody note, the alto voice, except for in measure 7, there's a slight difference here. Right, so we're going to clap the rhythm of the first line, reading the soprano notes, the top notes. All right, so here we go. I'll count two measures. I like to always count two measures because it gives us time to get into the tempo and sort of prepare ourselves to read the rhythms very calmly. We don't want to build up any anxiety as we're sight reading, which is very typical for new learners. All right, so hands up. We'll clap this together. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2. Excellent. So as we're counting that, we're just saying 1, 2, 3 on the beats. There's 3 beats per measure. And wherever the beat is divided, or we're saying something in between the beats, we're using the syllable and. So an example of that is here. On beat 2, the and of beat 2, we have an 8th note on the second syllable of the word gather. Okay, I'm going to show it this time playing on the keyboard. All right, and just take a listen if you're relatively new to reading music and playing the keyboard, or if you'd like to practice along, count the rhythm out loud. Count 1, 2, 3, because I really want you to focus on the meter more so than playing the notes at the moment. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2. So that's the end of the first phrase. The first phrase ends on beat 2 right there. All right, so one last time on that first phrase. Counting with me. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2. And you'll notice that last measure, I'll put that on the screen. That very last measure only has 2 beats in it because the phrases, all the phrases here start on beat 3. All right, and they've put beat 3 into the next measure, so they have 2 incomplete measures, or 2 measures that are shorter than the time signature. That's extremely common when you're reading hymns, because hymns are printed in the hymnal or on the page usually to accommodate non-musicians reading the lyrics, so the people in the congregation singing along. And they're often printed so that everything fits on one page. I'll show you, if you click on the PDF icon here in Piano Marvel, a lot of these tunes you can just print them, which they may be easier for you to play from printed material. You'll see it's arranged to all fit on one piece of paper. And in order to do that, we'll have things where we have incomplete measures, like here, where we have just 2 beats in a measure, with the 3rd beat on the next line or the next system of music. All right. So you might find things that are a little bit different from hymn music or hymnals versus music that's actually really arranged for the keyboard, for the piano. Okay, so we've gone through and we've counted that rhythm. Now we're going to read the notes on the keyboard. All right, so we're starting on D and A, so D just above middle C, and then the A there, a perfect 5th above. All right, and we're going to sight read just the right hand. So let's do that very slowly. We'll do it in prepare mode. Prepare mode allows us to be the driver of the tempo, so this gives us plenty of time to read the rhythms, follow along on the keyboard, and it will highlight, if we play the correct notes, they'll be green. If we play the incorrect notes, it'll show them in red, so you can sort of compare what am I playing versus what should it be. So we're going to mark that, go ahead and play that in prepare mode, and we'll just do those first two phrases of music. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and we'll stop right there. So some things to think about as you're playing this. So as I'm playing this on the keyboard, when we play hymns on the piano, a really good exercise to try is legato playing. So legato just means smooth or connected, or smooth and connected. And in order to do that, we want to keep the melody note, the top note, as smooth and connected as we can. So it'll sound like this. All right, meaning there's no space or break between the notes. This would be staccato or just not legato. All right, right, so when we're playing hymns, we want the melody note, the top note, to be legato and smooth. The bottom note, the alto voice, that D there, we want to keep it as legato as we can, but it doesn't have to be perfectly legato. And that's kind of one tip or secret to playing hymns. If you allow the inside voices, the alto and the tenor, to be not legato, broken up, it's a lot easier to play. So watching my hand as I do that, and you may be able to hear that very easily. If you're not able to hear that easily, that's okay. It's a pretty small detail to listen to. So if you're sort of new to analyzing music and thinking more deeply about it, it's okay if you're not quite catching on to that subtle, very small difference. Okay, so we're going to read this now. We're going to switch into the left hand in Piano Marvel. So we'll go into our practice mode. We're going to look at left hand, first two phrases. All right, and I will caution you, I'll point out some things. Here in measure 8, you'll notice that the distance between the bass voice, those bottom notes, and the tenor voice, the top notes, it starts to get pretty wide. So let's look at the distance between this B and this D here. So we're going to look at that on the overhead keyboard here. So the D is here and the B is there. I'll just scoot my head over there. That is a long distance to span your hand. That's a tenth. The interval between the two notes, the distance, is a tenth. Try playing just that alone. Most people will have extreme difficulty doing that, because if you look at the position of the hand, I can really only reach that if my pinky just catches the edge of the key and my thumb catches the edge of the key. If I try to play them on the top of the key, I'm going to hit more keys. It's just my hand is not large enough to reach them. All right. So a tenth is, it's a pretty large interval, and most people will have trouble playing that. So when we read music that has a large interval like that, what we may have to do is use the thumb to play that tenor note. All right. So another tip for playing hymns or sight reading hymns is to think about the tenor voice. Often we'll need the thumb from the right hand to play it. All right. So if I play through this second phrase, let's just take a preview of what it sounds like. Let's see, and I'll play it on the keyboard, but I'll read it from Piano Marvel. All right, so we're playing that left hand. It'll sound like this. I might use my thumb to play those top two notes. All right, let's take a look at the score. All right, so let's take that slow at 60. We'll do it in prepare mode. All right, I'll count 2 measures and we'll start. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 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 3. And stopping right there. All right. So let's see, I don't have a view that's easy to show you the keyboard and the sheet music, but I'll get that set up for next week. Let's take a look at that same thing I just played. All right, I'm going to play it again, and just notice when we get to the distance that's more than an octave, all right, that's where we're going to introduce our thumb to sort of come in like a lifeline and help us reach that tenth, that large interval there. All right, so I'm going to play that again. Oh, sorry, that's not the beginning of the piece. Let's start that one more time. All right, so I'm going to play those first two phrases of the piece left hand only, just paying attention to where the thumb sort of shifts in to help us. All right, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1. All right, so right when the interval was a tenth, that's where we snuck in the thumb to help out. Okay? If you have questions, let me know in the chat. We're going to go through and play those first two phrases, hands together. All right, we'll take it a little bit slower even. And when we're sight reading hymns, I find that it is easier to read the notes from the bottom to the top. So if we read bass, tenor, alto, soprano, and keep your eye focused on the bass note. I think that's a hard tendency to get used to, but once you do, you're more likely to play more correct notes when you're sight reading. All right, let's sight read that together one last time in prepare mode, the first two phrases of the hymn. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Stopping there. All right, and I think my keyboard audio might be breaking up a little bit, but we'll just push through on that. Okay, so another tip for playing hymns and sort of perfecting your legato playing, which is not a natural feeling and it takes people a long time to slip into playing that way very naturally. So when you're playing this on the piano, when you practice it, don't use the pedal at all. So the pedal on your piano, of course, when you press the pedal, that makes the note continue playing once you lift your hand. Oh, good, David, I see your comment. The lag this week is much better. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Let's take a look at the keyboard here. When you're playing legato, like I was saying, if you hold the note and you hold your pedal down, the note will continue to ring out, even once your hand is gone. But an organ doesn't work that way, and the music is written for the organ. So I'm going to switch the sound on my keyboard to organ. And let's listen to those first two lines, watching just the legato playing with the hands, and I won't use the pedal at all to play through these first two phrases. And I'll just switch back to piano. In order to do that successfully, your thumb really has to, or your finger, all your fingers, your skin has to stay in contact with the key. If you're actually physically lifting your hand off the keyboard, it's going to be much harder to produce that legato playing. All right, so remember, just keep your skin in contact with the keyboard. And it doesn't mean you can never lift it off the keyboard. It just means, consciously try to keep your fingers attached to the keys, and that will produce a legato sound. Okay, we're going to look at the last two phrases here, and we're going to break them apart as well, right hand and left hand. So our last two phrases, all right, starting here. Let's see, we're going to practice from measure 10 at beat 3. Or I think if we highlight that, excuse me, I'm struggling here for just a bit. I think if I highlight that, that's going to set our practice measures. Yeah, excellent. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to do that in prepare mode, right hand only. So, and we're going to do that in the piano sound. And let me show you the location of that before we start. So we're starting on an E in the alto voice and an A in the soprano voice. So we're just above middle C, E, and A. All right, so that's our starting position for our hand. All right, and starting here right on the word the for measure 10. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1. All right. One thing I want to point out, and this is very common in hymns, like I was mentioning, hymns are arranged on the paper, on the layout of the score, to really facilitate the congregation singing along, which is good for the congregation, but not for the organist or the pianist, because you'll see things that don't make any sense in the notation. So for example, if we look here in measure 16, 17, beat 3, the third beat, the text is saying he forgets. So he and for are on these 2 eighth notes. But the pianist or the organist is being asked to tie those together. So play them tied together. So that would just be 1 quarter note tied together. Which, I mean, that's not a hard concept to understand, but it makes it hard to sight read. And it's strange because if it was piano music, we would never do that. We're not worried about the lyrics for the piano. So you'll find that in hymnals where things are tied over in unusual ways because they're trying to convey to you that when you play it on the organ or piano, hold those notes, tie them over. But when you're singing it, they want to show 2 distinct notes for each syllable because many people in the congregation won't have a clue how to read music. So they're just sort of looking for the visual cue of, oh, there's 2 notes and 2 syllables. There should be 2 there, you know. So just be aware when you're reading a hymnal, there's all kinds of strange conventions for laying out the music. Let's sight read that one more time in the left hand. We're going to do those last 2 phrases again. All right. And some things to look out for. We've got in measure 11, 12, 13, the alto voice is holding over while the soprano voice is moving. Similarly, when we get to measure 17, it does the same thing. So the alto, that E, is being held while the soprano is moving. All right, so what does that mean for us on the keyboard? Well, when we look on the keyboard, it means some fingers are staying still, that thumb is staying still, while other fingers are moving together. Right? So if you don't know, your hand, I don't know the technical term for it, but the thumb, you know, can move very independently from the rest of the fingers. So really there's sort of like a bye-bye flap, my piano teacher used to say. It's like how you say bye-bye, bye-bye. When you have 2 voices, an alto and a soprano, we often divide them using this bye-bye flap on our hand, which is totally not the name of whatever that joint is. But that just means the thumb plays the lower voice and the rest of the fingers play the upper voice. So when we look at the keyboard, All right, this is an example where the E, the alto, is holding while the soprano is played on the A and a G natural, that is. All right, so this part of the bye-bye flat plays the top melody. This part of the flat plays the bottom melody. All right, and that probably sounds funny if you've never heard that. I thought it was funny when my teacher would say it. But it does explain like how do you divide the notes into the proper fingers without really going into a lot of detail. Okay, let's play these last two phrases one more time for the left hand. Let's go into practice. All right, here we go. Sight reading the left hand. Our starting position is D and F sharp, just below the middle C. D and F sharp, so starting there. Ready? And 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2. I think this started us at the beginning of the piece. Let's try starting just at the last measures, 10 to the end. All right, and so our starting position will be A and C sharp. Sorry about that. All right, so the A just below middle C and the C sharp just above middle C. All right, here we go. The last two phrases there. All right, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. All right, the thing I'll caution you about in this piece, and this is pretty common in a lot of hymns, the left hand, all right, just before the end of the piece, probably has more activity than the rest of the whole piece. And that's because the composer is usually finding their way back to outline the 4 chord, the 5 chord, and the 1 chord before they end the piece. It gives it a very strong cadence or a very strong feeling of, this is the end of the piece. But the result of that is usually the left hand or the bass is moving more actively than before. So you may want to take measure 16 very slowly a couple times. Okay? All right, so let's put that all together. We'll do the whole piece, left hand and right hand together, but just the last two phrases. All right, so hands together. All right, and our keyboard position will look like so. All right, so A, C sharp, E, and A. So our hands are in that position. All right, and I'm probably going to use the right hand thumb and pointer finger on the melody note. All right, so here we go. And let's see, let's highlight that together. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3, All right, so it's a relatively simple hymn, but there are a couple tricky spots in there throughout the piece. Before we put it all together, let me know if you have questions in the comments. We'll sight read the whole thing one more time. If you are finding that this is just beyond your skill level, this time only play the melody note, just the top note. All right. And if you're really new to piano or really new to sight reading, just count along the meter. Just count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and sort of visually watch the melody as we move along together. The hardest thing about sight reading really is training yourself to just keep moving forward even after you make mistakes and stay in tempo throughout your sight reading. Sight reading is different than practicing the keyboard. If we were to really break this down and be practicing, we might be doing a lot of different things at a much slower tempo. But for today, let's focus on either the melody only, counting the meter only, or playing along on the keyboard if you're ready for that. Okay, let's finish this up with the assessment. We'll see if we can keep up with that speed at 60. All right, here we go.
1, 2, 3, set, go.
3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2. Okay, so I dropped a couple notes in there, and by that what I mean is, for example, where you see these red notes in the bass, some of those I just left out the bass note or the tenor note as I sight read through that. And that just makes it easier to keep moving. And you know, if you drop a note here or make play an incorrect note there, the important thing is to just keep moving and to remain as calm as you can in your body so that your brain can really stay focused on moving forward to play the rest of the piece. Okay, that's going to wrap us up for this one, Prayer of Thanksgiving. I will give you a very quick preview, though, of the easier version, which you may be interested in. Again, this was in Recital with Timeless Hymns, Book 3, and this was page 10, We Gather Together, so the same tune. I'm just going to sight read this one together, and let's see how it goes. So this is a key of C, very small range, a little bit low note here at the bottom, so it's good to look out for that. But it's much simpler arrangement. So here we go. I'll just read through that one.
1, set, go. But not too bad. Much easier, especially if you play it slower than that, than the hymn arrangement of that. Okay, so that's going to wrap up our show for today. A couple quick announcements. So next week's show is on my birthday. So we're going to sing, we're going to practice Happy Birthday so you can learn that tune, because everybody needs to know how to play Happy Birthday multiple times a year for all your friends and family. So we're going to do that next week.
Other things to look at. If you enjoyed looking at Piano Marvel, again, you can download that at 1minutemusiclesson.com/toolbox. Very good software for learning to play the piano and how to read, and particularly sight read better. Let's see, quick comment rolling in. Don, this was excellent as usual. Thanks, Leon. I really appreciate these lessons. Thanks, Don. I appreciate that comment. Another quick thing to say, just I think that's going to be it for today. If you do have questions, I'm happy to stick around in the comments a little bit longer for that. And again, if you're watching this on the replay through the week, post your questions here and we'll either answer them during the week or on the next episode. We meet every Saturday at 10 a.m. And that is going to be it for today's episode.